Going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How's everybody doing out there on this Thursday, May 4th of 2023? If everyone can go, please give us a like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Find us on the socials at the Alex Cuesta Show. I said that because I looked over and I saw that David was still here, and I was disappointed and hoping that by the time I got through that spiel, he wouldn't be here, but he just doesn't go away.
I'm like a leech. Stay on. Worse. I said like, but that's, it's down talking. So no.
You went from looking like Pancho Villa to now Mexican Jared Leto. Like, I don't understand what you're going for right now. I wish we were streaming now, because then I could have people in the chat just making fun of you.
It's a very 90s look.
Yeah. For right now, it is. For right now, listen, sometimes you get long hair, you get it done just to get through a process and get it to another spot. Also, could be going for sponsorships. I'm perfectly fine with taking Bud Light. I will get the money. I will do whatever I need.
David Mulvaney. David's getting ready for his Christian Mingle profile. That's what he's doing right now. That's for the Christian Mingle right there. Or you could do like Lotus Eaters and just throw you on like Black People Meet, and like Date Whites Only will be your profile. Like that'll be what you do there.
It's funny. David Mulvaney seems like a more fitting name for him than it does for the tranny. I don't know why Dylan Mulvaney. Something about the last name Mulvaney doesn't give me like tranny vibes. It doesn't sound like someone's fabulous, you know.
It certainly does it. So, well, before we get into the show, last week's show, we had Epic Mike on. We kind of completed the arc of the Epicverse. He's a co-founder of the Epicverse, member of Geeks and Gamers. Great show. Talked about, a whole bunch of his inspiration, why he does it, how he got started with writing and everything. Him and Josiah doing awesome stuff. Looking forward to Epicverse. Go back and give that show a listen. I'm going to do the corny thing and say the May the 4th be with you to everybody for Star Wars Day. But we are going to do not Disney Star Wars. Fuck Disney Star Wars. Only pre-Disney Star Wars, Force be with you. For Disney Star Wars can eat a dick. I hate that stuff. So pre-Disney Star Wars, may the Fourth be with you. If you like new Star Wars, I don't like you anymore. So I don't know. Well, maybe we won't. It is strong, but it deserves strong things. But this week, we have a fun show ahead, as we always do. You heard the guest already. He's Jose Galison. He's a member of the Tower Gang. What's going on, brother?
Oh, not much, man. Just ready to shoot the shit with you guys. Should be fun.
Absolutely.
I kind of wish we had video right now, because like your wall in the back is awesome. All the things that you have, all the Funko Pops that are now in landfills, they're great. Everything looks good behind you.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I do get like mixed reviews. So everyone's like, "That's dope," or like, "Look at this faggot with all his Funko Pops."
Well, I know if Matt Walsh was on here, he'd be like, "You're a degenerate for liking comic books and anime and manga. You're just going down the path of Marxism." Because Matt Walsh, I don't know. I'm not a Daily Wire guy. I don't know about you, Jose.
Yeah, I don't know. I had my period of time where I was big into that, like forever ago. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess they're a good stepping stone, but if that's where you stop, it's like, what are you doing? Personally, I mean, I don't know particularly you guys' politics or thoughts and stuff. I mean, I'm sure maybe we'll get into it, but I'm of the libertarian variety. I'm more specifically an anarchist, an anarcho-capitalist, agorist, right-wing anarchist. I can throw a bunch of different labels that apply to me, and but yes, I'm definitely not. But that was like, I guess, a path. I'm stepping stone along my journey to where I am is the Rubens, the Shapiros, the Crowders, like those type of whatever milieu, that area. That's kind of where I did go through there, and it's funny you brought up the comics. I actually think I'm of the opinion. I actually think comics are like a good thing. I mean, it just depends on what you're reading, but like I do think they are like a stepping stone to becoming like a reader. Yeah, like because you are reading comics and those pictures, but it's like most people don't just be like, you know what, I'm gonna read Solzhenitsyn right now. Like, like most people, like to get into it as a young adult, I was like reading comic books, and once I started reading some of the more like some of the better comic books, there's a lot of good comic books out there.
Absolutely.
You know, like Dark Knight Returns, stuff like that. Like once you start getting into some of those ones, that actually have like deeper themes. You kind of get sucked into like
the original Civil War, the Marvel one of Civil War and Infinity Gauntlet and everything like that.
Yeah,
and
once you get stuck in those, it kind of like you get into like actual, heady topics, and it brings you to other places.
Yeah, and Dave and I were a fan of G Prime. We're a fan of George Alexopoulos. You see Gooseberry Pie behind me. That's his children's book. We ordered his in Razor Fist. Whatchamacallit, Ghost of the Badlands, a Western. But it's like we support that whole thing. We're big manga anime nerds. We like comics. So
it's just stories. Like
y'all read Berserk? Y'all read Berserk?
Absolutely. I'm so sad Miura died.
I'm not caught up, but
so
I've read a decent amount.
Yeah, I'm not caught up too. I'm
caught up.
I think I'm at. I think I got up to like the volume 9 of like the big mega volumes they're putting out, like the nice leather-bound ones. Yeah.
It's funny. It's like I was saying to David, it was years ago when Miura started putting out like 2 to 3 chapters a year. And it was for a long time. If you're a Berserk fan, like you got 1 chapter a year, you enjoyed it. And then he put out 2, and then the following year he put out 3. I should have known that something negative was going to happen because he never did that. And I was saying to Dave, I'm like, this is Christmas. And I think it was like August. I'm like, I don't need anything anymore. I got my 3rd chapter of Berserk. I was pumped, but yeah. So we're into that. So I want to ask you, Jose, what, for people that don't know, what is Tower Gang? Who are you guys? What do you guys do? Give us a kind of a rundown and plug yourselves. I want people to know and go find you guys.
Yeah, Tower Gang's, I guess you can just call us an offensive comedy podcast. I mean, not that any of us are particularly comedians. It's just mostly a group of guys that kind of goofing off and joking around together. I mean, most of us, a little bit more than half of us have our own individual shows. It's a group of like 6 guys. We kind of joke that it's basically a group of 5 and one kind of shows up every now and then. But we have, if anyone saw my appearance at Timcast, I was with Reed Coverdale. He's the one we always joke that like never shows up, but he's like he works a ton of crazy hours, a real super duper blue collar guy, always driving truck, so he's like at this period of time he's working a lot, so he doesn't have a ton of time for the show, but every once in a great while I'll pop on. But yeah, it's me, Reed. Reed has his own show, Naturalist Capitalist, which is kind of taking a back seat lately. I think he'll probably come back at some point once it fits his fancy to start doing it again. But me, Reed, Clint Russell, who has his own show, Liberty Lockdown. Then there's Top Lobster, who I guess I said over half of show, but I always, for some reason in my head, I always include Top as having a show, but he doesn't. He has, I think he's like talking about starring in his own show, kind of in the conspiracy, kind of almost like a Sam Tripoli type vein of shows. Like I think is what he's trying to do. I mean, he hasn't started yet, but he's more like a merch guy. Like he does a ton of art. That's kind of like why we have a pretty decent production over at Tower Gang, because of all the art he's done. I mean, he does all art for all our individual shows as well. So that's kind of what he's known for, being the art guy, but he's also a co-host of the show. And then we have a guy that we call Fat Dave or Cole. I mean, you can go with one of the two. Like there's a story behind the Fat Dave, which I won't bore you with it. And then we have Toad, who's another individual and neither of them have a show. That's kind of the only show they do. But yeah, it's just kind of a rough group of guys. We it became a thing during the peak COVID lockdowns. I think a lot of people started getting like really online. That's when I started my podcast around that time too. And so like we kind of started targeting around like in the early days of my podcast, probably before episode 50. I'm somewhere between 200 and 250 right now. Nice. So that's kind of when we came together. There was the name Tower Gang comes from, there was a period of time, I don't know how involved you guys really are on Twitter, but there was a period of time where Twitter was really popping off, like peak COVID. And I think there was a lot of angst, a lot of people get on there, and a lot of people just like hating the establishment. And there became this thing where we kind of figured out a way to hack the algo. It kind of was like this organic thing that happened where people started creating these things called towers, and there was like group chats that would form around it, and they were called Tower Gangs. We had a point where we had like multiple Tower Gangs that would coordinate with each other, and because there was like a max limit of people you could have in a group chat, but it was something insane like 70. But even then we would have like 2, 3, 4, 5 group chats coordinating each other, and like whenever we had like a big tower, it'd be like, all right, we'll contact the other gang and we'll kind of coordinate on this one. And it was just like we'd almost like just be putting out hits on establishment figures, and we'd be like the most notable one I think was we've done a bunch, but there's like we did Megan McCain Daddies in Hell Pork Chop, and it was like the idea is like what you do is And what you do is you put a letter below, like someone will reply to a tweet and they'll put like a D, and then someone else will reply an A. And if you understand the format of Twitter, then when all that's done, you like every individual person spells out a different letter. And the key is you don't use a different person for each letter. And you're not supposed to repeat. And you know, by the end there, if you look, you can scroll through the thread and it just spells out one letter at a time, Dies in Help Workshop. And it was like a great algo hack because it's just a way it's set up. And it makes sense. I think since then I don't know if they found a way to suppress the algo when it comes to towers, but it's just not the same anymore. It doesn't get the same traction. But at that time, it makes sense because, like, you know, if you have a long thread that creates engagement, I can understand why a tech company would be like, oh, this indicates a lot of people are creating replies, creating a lot of buzz. We're going to up this in the algo. And so it was this way that like 300 follower accounts could like get, I don't know, huge blue checks or like
so
huge
the funny thing
journalists to be like they actually see it and be like, what the hell?
I just love how leftists have their little gay hashtags that they do and they go and attack like people. And what do people on like the right hand side do? Troll the fuck out of people to get popular. Like it is just absolute, like the left can't meme is a great hashtag because it's true. Like all towers were just gigantic memes. Like we're going to figure out what meme we're going to do. We're going to target a person and we're going to do it. Like there, you know, there's some people, we need to bring towers back, whether it gets traction or not.
I mean, towers are in live chats all the time. Just make it on Twitter.
Yeah, I think on Twitter, because like David Hogg needs a tower every time he fucking tweets. Like there's some people that just need it done to them just to like this, like derail their whole entire things. Like, so I freaking love that. I love the background of it. I think, you know, more people, where can people find, you know, Tower Gang episodes and things like that?
Well, we're on YouTube. I mean, if you want to go to YouTube, you can, but I would say we've already been nuked once, because we do go hard in the paint. So, you know, really hard. And so we've been nuked once. So I would suggest people go follow us on like Rumble or like Spotify, because we actually have the video enabled on Spotify, so you can watch the video on there.
That's dope.
Yeah, surprisingly, weirdly, I think our best numbers are on Spotify. It's weird. I don't understand it, but I think it's probably.
Don't say it too loud, because in the Spotify leftists are going to be like, "Take it down! What are we doing?"
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess I think it's a function of us being nuked. Why our Spotify probably does so well, because that's a consistent place to do it, and because of the video that we have there. It's kind of a more video-oriented show, but we are on all the major audio pockets as well. If you want to listen to it audio-wise, you know, whenever I listen to the show, if I listen to it back, I do usually just the audio. So, but I also was there watching it, so I'm picking up. I was like involved, so I knew the context of the images going on. But and I think you probably can, if you really want to just do audio, you probably can do fine, but you may miss out some things. But yeah, it's Tower Gang everywhere. That's where you can find it pretty much. And like I said, we all have our individual shows. So I have the No Way Jose show. So like Tower Gang's kind of like my outlet for like offensive comedy. No Way Jose is just kind of like roughly whatever the hell I want to cover, and that's kind of why I named it No Way Jose as opposed to like Liberty Hour or something like that, because I didn't really want to like niche it down too much to be like, this is what I want to cover. I just want to cover stuff I want to cover, although that does tend to be, for me, the things that tend to be what's interesting me is like libertarian theory. I've done a bunch of live readings of books, so if you want to go like full series, if for some reason you just don't want to read and you just want to throw in a podcast and listen to someone read to you and then provide commentary throughout, that's the way to. I mean, that's on my show. I have a decent amount of those. You can go check out my playlists. Is the easiest
only
way
if
to probably
you'll tuck
find
me
them.
in at night after the chapter. If you'll tuck me in after the chapter,
on the forehead.
give a look, like you should, like after every chapter, you should be like, all right, good night to you. They're already tired. I'm going to continue on to the next one, but Jose loves you. Like,
But yeah, no, and then probably the thing I've become most known for as of late is my Oklahoma City bombing series. I've done like something like well over, I think somewhere in the ballpark of like 15 hours on it. Awesome. I found when I found this video, you know, a while back before I started the series, from this individual on Twitter, at Crack Connoisseur, Jinx, and he had this.
Oh, Jinx!
Yeah, Jinx, he's the man, and he put out this Terrence Yeeki edit. It was just a quick little 2-minute video, good little, put a bunch of little facts in there. You can have emotional hook song, and I just remember being like, holy crap, what is this? And I started digging in, and then that's when I like kind of sparked my interest, and then it kind of drags you into the Oklahoma City bombing, and I was like, you know what, I want to cover this. And then I kind of like put out the feelers like on Twitter, like, hey, who's the best person to get to cover this? And I got a lot of there was a few reputable people that I like trust or like, hey, you need to get Richard Booth on. And Richard Booth, who he is like probably one of the best guys, if not the best guys to talk to about the Oklahoma City bombing, in my opinion. He is someone who's I mean, he admittedly says like I don't know if he's diagnosed, but he's basically a straight up autist, and his thing is Oklahoma City bombing. He spent probably somewhere around a decade collecting documents and has the world's largest public archive of Oklahoma City bombing related documents on the libertarianinstitute.org/OKC.
So 2 things. I want to get more into the OKC bombing in a second. One, David has a theory about guys and autism, and this is a perfect time to bring it up. He believes that we're all autistic in some way, different levels. Like the male species is all certain levels of autism. It's it's just like, because what do guys do when we focus on something and we want to become experts? That's
obsessive, man.
We're obsessive, and then if anyone takes us out of there, that's when we become assholes. That's when we're like, no, get the fuck away from me. I need to finish this. But it's like, and it's certain levels of autism, and I agree with David because I think guys are very much like that. But the second thing,
real quick, I want to comment that it's funny. I actually was talking to my wife about this just the other day, and it was like having the same exact discussion. And we were talking about like the difference between men and women, and I was saying, statistically speaking, men are far more likely to be geniuses. But my wife kind of almost like got like kind of like a woman. But I was like, whoa, wait, there's more. I was like, but women are far more likely to be polymaths, which a polymath is someone who's skilled in multiple fields. Mm-hmm. So women's brain tend to, I think, cover a broad spectrum kind of deal. Whereas men are much more like tunnel vision, one thing at a time. And so I was like, so basically you women are like, if anything, it's almost like a compliment to you guys. You're able to focus on like actual legit stuff that needs to be, whereas we're like, oh, cool. Like I'm really good at piano.
Dig, man. We just go.
Yeah, but that's exactly also why
men are the equivalent of the guy who's like retarded, but he's like phenomenal when it comes to like the piano or something.
Yeah. We're Rain Man. We are all Rain Man in our own way. But it's also like why husbands get pissed when we're focusing on something to do for that day, and then our wife starts to put up the shelf, and we know they're going to put a fucking hole in the wall. So we have to stop doing what we're going to do and go and level and put up that shelf because we're going to end up fixing that hole anyway. So that's exactly why I have a theory, and it pisses my wife off, and it's funny though. But like, the theory is like women can multitask, right? And men can't. No, when you're married, women don't multitask. They just start a bunch of shit that the husband has to finish. That is what it is. So it's not that they can do it. They just know what the fuck they're doing. They start the things that they've been asking us to do forever, and we just got to go do it at that point. So there's that. So I want to ask, you were talking about your political philosophy, that you're more in the libertarian, anarcho-capitalist field. So you were mentioning a little bit how you went down the rabbit hole. Like you kind of went to like, it's not kind of fair to call them neocons, but they're certainly closer to the neocon-esque people with your Daily Wire stuff. And Dave Rubin was on the left. Clearly on the left, so I think he would certainly qualify.
Right pipeline.
Yeah, I think he would certainly qualify now. I think he's kind of landed in the closer into that neoconish area, maybe paleo-conservative area of there. But it's like, what ultimately brought you there? And if you don't say Ron Paul, we might be fighting.
I mean, I guess by extension, it was sort of Ron Paul in a certain sense. I'll say it wasn't directly Ron Paul. I was aware of Ron Paul. I do like him. I think he's a great guy. But it was really Dave Smith. I kind of went down that rabbit hole. I started to get into, like we mentioned earlier, like the Daily Wires, the Ben Shapiro. Well, I guess that's redundant there. But you know what I mean? Yeah. The Rubins. And I would say Shapiro is a neocon personally. I mean, he's a neocon light. But But yes, he I kind of started going down those roles, and then I started getting to like Rogan, and then I think from Rogan, I want to say I don't remember if this is right or not, but I feel like I found Dave from Rogan, but I might be wrong. Yeah, exactly. And so Dave Smith, and then I kind of listened to him for a long time, and like we were talking about earlier with comics and like kind of get into reading, I was big into comics. I'm not as big now. I don't really read as much as I should. If anything, I'm still way too sucked into other stuff. I'll be reading, so like right now I'm reading a book on the OKC. There's always some other thing. Like my friggin' laptop that I'm streaming from right now is literally on a stack of books that I'm supposed to get around to reading. But every once in a great while, I do have to take a break and be like, I've read way too much heady stuff. I just need to take it back a little bit and read some like Berserk or some other like comic or something. But yeah, that's kind of what brought me down the road. And then Dave Smith on his show, he always talks about the book Anatomy of the State. Anatomy of the State is, and I finally got around to reading that book. And Anatomy of the State is what like really it lays down all, because I've been listening to Dave for a while, and he would like occasionally point out this argument or that argument, and I was able to, you know, be like, okay, he brings up a good point here, but then fall back on this other thing and fall back on this other thing. But once you read 90 State, it just completely is a complete breakdown of all those different things. So I'm not able to like kind of flip flop, you know, like, so that is what sucked me in. And it's funny enough, I actually ended up getting Dave Smith on my show, probably my actual most viewed episode ever. I tell you. Although now my OKC series is catching up to it. But I got Dave Smith on to cover Anatomy of State. We just did a breakdown of the book.
That's amazing.
So yeah, if you go to my channel, I have like top videos. It's on the top video if you just look at the front page. So if you want to listen to that one, so that was cool, kind of full circle, bringing that back to it. But yeah, that's the book that really did it for me. It's kind of what made me be like, go from that divide from libertarian, what people call minarchists. I'm not as once again, I'm not as sure how up to date you guys are on the term. So like minarchist being like, you guys, minarchist is the idea that you do believe there should be a government, but it should be like the minimum. Because I was at this point where I was like, yes, I fully agreed that the government was like evil in a sense, but it was necessary. And I think Anatomy of State does a good job of like bridging that gap from where you think it's evil and necessary to where you feel like now it's evil and not necessary. And that's what did it for me, is that book specifically. I think if people, like I said, if people want to go check out that video, you can see if you don't want to actually read the book, it's a pretty short book. You can read it easily in like a day or 2 or 3, depending on how quick of a reader you are. I think it's, you know, most people could probably knock it out in a day. It's barely considered a book. It's like this big kind of deal. But yeah. So that's what did it for me. That book right there. I mean, I don't know how much you want to focus on. I can't offhand really recall all the different arguments in it.
No, you don't have to go crazy on that. But you know what's interesting, because I've heard of the minarchist stuff, and when I think of minarchist, it kind of just reminds me of what a conservative's supposed to be, right? In a way, it is your small government, very limited government. We understand that a centralized government isn't good, and we want basically individual rights and freedoms to reign supreme, and states and localities kind of rule people's lives much more than the federal government. It's kind of what the idea of the Articles of Confederation were. But obviously that fell apart, because you do need some sort of centralizing thing to to keep a union together, right? Because that's what we are. We're a union of states. So like, it's interesting because I jumped into Jeff Charles does the Liberty Spaces, and Jeff Charles is jumped into the libertarian bandwagon officially, and he had on some.
Jeff's an anarchist now. I believe he's claimed he's anarchist.
Well, he's clear. That's the black dude, right?
Yeah. We had him on the show. Yeah, he's a cool dude.
Not that I'm saying it, like, I mean, I was trying to picture in my head. I'm pretty sure I knew you were talking about that.
Yeah.
If Jeff listens, and I just lied. I didn't mean to. I'm pretty sure he's claimed he is like basically fully an anarchist.
Jeff has been going into a political crisis, and I understand, because he started off on the right, and he's seeing all the dumb shit that comes from Twitter conservatives, and I think that might be part of the issue, is that he's on Twitter so much, and the Twitter conservatives do not represent conservatism. I consider a lot of those guys post-conservative, if we're going to be quite honest, because they've gone so far away from what it's supposed to be. But you know, it's interesting, because I listened to it, and he had a lot of the Texas Libertarian Party members on there, and they were kind of railing against the Texas conservatives are kind of assholes. They're not great, and they don't really play nice with the libertarians. But in my head, and Jose, you could tell me if you disagree with this, I don't understand what libertarians are doing around the country. You guys could very easily infiltrate every single local Republican Party, and it's not even close. I don't think there needs to be a libertarian party, if we're going to be honest. I think there needs to be a libertarian movement that can infiltrate the Republicans, because obviously I don't agree with all the shit Republicans stand for, but it's better for you guys to caucus with the Republicans and the conservatives, because at least the individual rights theory is there. Like, the Democrats are completely lost. They used to have that element, which is why you had left libertarians, right? But that element's gone. Your left libertarians are now considered crazy conservatives. So I feel like at the local and state level, especially, libertarians should be dominating the Republican Party, and they could be, because I feel like a lot of Republicans would go for that. Now, I feel where the Libertarian Party is failing a lot of their members is they're going for the national way too much. And I think with the libertarian theory, national is almost impossible at this point, because to come in and just say, we're anti-war, we're anti-intervention completely and totally, we don't want to even hear about anything is going to turn off a lot of people. Maybe when the boomer generation dies out, it might be an easier message. But right now, I feel like that's an impossible message to win on a national scale, which is why your Rons and Rand Pauls were semi-popular, because they're willing to bend a little with their libertarian means. And Larry Sharp, I've had him on a show. He's in New York over here. He calls himself kind of a sensible libertarian. He understands the other side. So if you get in contact with more libertarians, I would love for you to portray for them, like, stop focusing on that national side. If you infiltrate the local and state, the national will naturally come. And I just think that libertarians in every state could dominate if they just focus locally and statewide. Do you agree there?
In a certain sense. Now, let me clarify. For one, I will kind of steel man them a little bit. I mean, there are certain factions within the Libertarian Party, although they've kind of been ousted, that would be like, really be like, oh, cool, we're going to run for president. And, oh, there's a chance. I mean, there's always those ones that kind of delude themselves. But I think the current group that's there, the LPMC, I think they're pretty aware. I mean, every now and then you see some people who are kind of cringe and like, oh yeah, maybe we could get this guy in. It's like, no, you're not going to win. And I'm actually of the opinion that if a libertarian did get in office, it would actually probably be one of the worst things for the libertarian movement. Personally, I really like if you somehow got someone that was, what I would consider to be a good libertarian, so far as philosophically in there, I think they would likely experience one of two. I guess I say one of two things, but there's, I guess, some sort of like, there's a spectrum in between these. I think you'd likely see they'd end up kind of having like the Trump phenomenon, where it's kind of like they didn't really get to do any of the things really they want to, because they kind of were getting bogged down by essentially the deep state at every turn. But and then on the other end, there's also, if they somehow do just like balls to the wall, just like, screw you, I don't care, I'm still going through this stuff, and to kind of don't really allow them to do that, because there is a way to just kind of forge through and just be like, I don't give a shit, you're going to try to make it seem like I'm a Russian sympathizer. Fine, whatever. Okay, yes, and then just kind of keep moving, But I think then that you're getting kind of closer to the convertible ride in Dallas type deal. So I think either way, it doesn't work out well for the movement. And obviously, then they will control the narrative after, to make it not really favorable to the Libertarian Party. So I don't think. But point I'm getting at is they are aware, and when their idea when they're running a president these days is this is a national speaking tour, which, okay, all right, fair enough. Now what I'm getting at, I am not a party guy. Even that term I threw out earlier, agorist, that typically, we can go deep in that, but generally speaking, there's a little bit more to it than what I'm about to say. But generally speaking, the agorist crowd, one of the most notable things about them is they typically are not big fans of going the political route. And by that, I mean, obviously we're talking about political stuff, like in a sense, in the idea of like a political philosophy. But so far as like voting, running as candidates, this, that, I don't have much faith in that at all. But now when you say, should they run in a local areas as Republicans? Now, I think if you're going to do it, I think that's preferable. Is my point. Now, I still ideally, I'd just be like, I don't know. I guess that I don't feel like necessarily it's best use of your time. But if you feel so compelled to go the political route, I do think that's preferable to the national. Is going local, hyper local, as best you can. It's actually Hans Hermann Hoppe. I'm very like, agorism is the most notable philosopher there is this guy named Samuel Ulrich Konkin. And there's this thing called praxis in libertarian, which if you understand what praxis means, it means you're kind of what you do, how you're going to go about it. And the praxis for agorism is essentially non-political. You interact in the market, you kind of interact in the gray and black markets. And then Hoppianism, Hans Hermann Hoppe, is a different praxis. The praxis he supports is what you're describing. Hyper-local, try to essentially take over a town, essentially start crafting laws to make them more amenable to, and if anything, just completely don't even worry about the national. Do stuff like make it so like you find ways to craft laws that like you
just
can't
firewall the national out. Just firewall them out from strong local and state and, and things like that. And, I kind of understand both, right? I understand the whole entire fuck politics, like this sucks. But the unfortunate part with that theory is, and like, I get the aggro side. Everyone's so tired of it. I don't think it's possible right now. I don't think it is possible to actually, like, I think it is, but you need to have a super deep pocket to work within that realm, right? Because the people who are effective in the gray and the dark areas are your guys that, and, some women, I guess, with the Clintons and stuff that have these super deep pockets to control it. I feel like you have to play the game a little bit, right? At this point, especially where, the anarchist, libertarian, aggro movements are, there's a lot of people that agree with them and not a lot of people that are willing to actually join, right? And be active in them. It's a lot easier to just fall back on, well, I agree with this side more, so I'm just going to go with this group and vote for this candidate and do what I need to do here, whatever to do so I can just go and live my life as I want to, right? So that's where, like, I understand the movement and I get being behind it, but I also think, and I think there's a lot of libertarians that are like this, that understand the realistic part of it, right? That know that, okay, I hate the system, I don't want to vote, but if I don't go and vote for X, Y gets in, and I really hate Y. And Y is going to prevent me from doing what I want and living my life and being free. So, I think it's difficult, and that's why I choose to, like, I'm a conservative. And that's where I am now. And I feel like we've gotten bogged down in politics so much where it's like, if you don't believe in everything one side believes and you're not that, and which I think is nonsense. Because I think if you're too conservative, you have a libertarian streak in you, right? We agree with liberty. We agree with, you agree with the Bill of Rights. You agree with the freedoms. That's your libertarian streak, right? We have that. And you also agree with small government. Now, I think where we differ is, like, I agree with the standing military. I agree with, legitimate defense reasons, right? Not my oil. I don't want to go to war for my oil. You know what I mean? Like, there's stupid ones, but I think there's legitimate reasons for us to get involved in things. And I think that's where we would defer from the libertarian and anarchist side to what a conservative would want.
Yeah, I do want to clarify what I was getting at too with the Hoppianism. I was saying that I was getting at, like, that would probably be my, like, next order of, like, preferences of praxis is if you are going to get involved in politics, that's the way to go. And kind of what I was getting at with the agorism is, I get what you're saying, but I think maybe with, like, a deeper analysis, you can understand that if you are interacting in the market, and if you're still having your libertarian values, you're still probably talking the world, you interact with people on day to day, I do think you do actually influence others that way. So from that, you're able to influence the conservatives and I think by actually withholding your vote, not interacting in the system, I also think that has an influence, because it shows, hey, there's these people not involved. Why are they not involved? How can we appeal to them? And, also I think to some extent when you have, I actually think in a weird way, when there are less people voting, I think there is some sort of signal, and whether that signal is received or not, it's still the reality on the ground of that, like, hey, so let's say we got to a point where 90% of people weren't voting. Like, can you imagine how it, not incompetent, but how weak the government would be? Because they would have this realization of, like, oh shit, like, only 10% of people are interacting.
Yeah, there's no mandate. There's no mandate.
There's no, like, there's clearly, like, if we try to pass through some, like, crazy laws, 90% of people are like, I don't give a shit about your laws. So it's the idea that you're actually being forced, it gets a little bit silly. And, like, I'm not saying, I understand those politics still exist. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, you are influencing people that are involving in politics. And that's why, to some extent, I think it's better to kind of influence the two major parties in that way. I also am of the opinion, I'm actually not a fan of the Libertarian Party existing, because I think party politics, there are certain incentives in place when you get involved in party politics to where they do, I think, like, I'm essentially of the opinion that, like, I think I'm very much in line philosophically with all the LPMC guys, but I'm of the opinion, whether it's in this voting cycle or the next voting cycle or, 2-3 more, I think it'll likely just devolve back into what it was before, and all you essentially did was put gas in the engine of that machine. You may get, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying at all there wouldn't be any positive things that come out of it. Yeah. But now if you weigh it against this and that, now you end up back with, the old guard, which I feel like was an awful representation of our values. And now you have, in some sense, kind of continued to conflate the Libertarian Party with libertarianism, which is why I'd prefer they just didn't exist at all. And like if they do exist, I would prefer them to be a laughing stock to where I get to go, look at those idiots. They don't represent me.
Kind of what the Republicans are for conservatives right now.
Yeah,
where,
so
like, conservatives hate Republicans.
Yeah. And I think that would also have rippling effects that would go out to the other parties. And I think you just kind of described there, the Republican Party is, as a party, isn't really what like a lot of kind of what I grew up as a conservative as well, is like what we kind of think of conservatism, like, because we are like, conservatism is really kind of the way I saw it was minarchism, essentially.
Rush Limbaugh was very much that way, and people like that were very much in the small government camp, make government as small as you can, and he always rallied and ripped against it. Now, what is your opinion of the Mises Caucus? Because a lot of people that are in the libertarian side tend to like the Mises Caucus, what they do, how hard they fight. What is your opinion of them?
I mean, like I was saying, those are like philosophically my people. Yeah. I just think they're kind of falling into the trap of getting involved in the party in general. I think it's going to be, and once again, I think when you're looking at a big picture thing, because everyone will always be like, well, look at this thing we did, look at that thing we did, look at that. I'm not denying there are positive effects of any given thing. Yeah. But if you weigh the good versus the bad, especially over the long arc of history, kind of what comes out of this and what else could you be doing instead? That's kind of where I'm at there. But I love those guys. I try to say that all the time. I try not to be a dick about it.
You're allowed to have your opinion, right? Yeah, you're allowed to sit there and say, I might agree with them, but I don't agree with how they're going about it. I love this conversation. I do want to get to the OKC stuff, so I'm going to kind of tie a bow. The one thing I do want to ask you is, you seem like a chill libertarian, but there are a lot of libertarians that are basically like CrossFit bros, that they can't help themselves about telling you about their libertarianism. And I got what you were saying, like, one of the better ways to get out there and talk to people about it. But they kind of come about it as like religious zealotry, right? Mm-hmm. And I kind of got that when I was listening to Liberty Spaces. One of the people talking, she was like, this is the way we live. This is what we do. This is what we go by. And I think that kind of turns people off sometimes. And I get it. You're not a full-on libertarian. You're kind of in the aggro and everything like that. So I think that's kind of why you're not that way. But
to be fair, I would call myself a libertarian. There's a differentiation between small L and big L, but we're not to get semantic, but yes.
Yeah. So, but it's like, I feel like some people get turned off when it just becomes like, well, you should do this and that and this and that. And it skeeves people the fuck out. It feels like to me at times, and I'm not saying this, but like how leftists preach, how some people are preachy, how like your Jehovah Witness will come to your door and knock on it. I feel like I might answer to a libertarian that's going to be like, have you said fuck the government today? It's like, I get it, yes, but it's like just just some of them just need to like take a step back and realize that if the conversation arises, cool. If not, don't put it in with every conversation had.
Yes, exactly. This is the agorism point I was kind of getting at.
Yeah.
Because the big point of agorism is it's counter economics is what's considered, and and everyone gets confused, and it's not a binary. That doesn't mean you need to go full Ted Kaczynski, go live in the woods. But the idea is agorism is just kind of, you're essentially trying to sort of move that somewhat that way, to the best of your ability. Not even necessarily the best ability. What risk you're willing to accept. It's as simple as something like, hey, say you're a waitress and you get tips. Do you report those to the government? No. It's essentially because no reasonable person does that. Like, why would you report this cash money you're getting that they have no idea you have? That's just silly. Now that's agorism action right there. That's what that is. That's the idea. Now it's just the idea of like getting people to understand that, and also to essentially not have this like idea, because I feel like a lot of people, if you want to call them a statist or whatever, like if you do explain this concept to them, there might be this like ingrained like slight shame maybe, or they're like, well, I guess you're kind of right, like maybe I should be reporting. You're like, no, you're not doing anything wrong. Like it's almost like getting the philosophical realization of that. And I think it's kind of like leading by example in a way. You don't have to be the annoying person. You can just be someone interacting in the market. And this kind of ties into a point that Hoppe makes a lot, which once again, he's not an agorist, but he makes a point that we need to have natural elites. And, I think interacting in the market, essentially, especially if you're trying to do it in a gray or more blackish, I guess if you're full on black, you might struggle. But I do think you're kind of creating natural elites. Like if you're an upstanding businessman and you're in your neighborhood, and people know that, like, hey, you know, obviously you're kind of balancing risk versus reward, and like you might be like, or you've just found a good tax lawyer or whatever, and you're just doing your best and you're being honest. You're like, yeah, of course I try to not pay as much taxes as possible. Why would I give them money?
Donald Trump, I mean, like, exactly, like the tax code, like, you gave me that loophole and I did it. Like, yes, that was exactly. Kind of one of the best quotes of like his against Hillary, when she's like, you didn't pay this in taxes. Like, well, your people voted for it and I just used it. And I thought that that's kind of similar to, you know, what that is. And I like that. And I like that. I think that's certainly something. So, you know, I hope anybody listening, if you had any questions, and if you do have any questions, go message Jose. He's really responsive. He's dope. Yeah.
On the live reading series, I've done Konkin when it comes to agorism. I've covered pretty much all his major books. I think he has like some smaller essays out here and there, but all like he has 3 major books that he's known for, and I've done live readings on all 3 of them. So if you are interested in it, you can check them out. Some are more shorter than others. And I've also I'm still in the midst of doing a live readings on one of Hoppe's books, which is a bit longer, Democracy, the God That Failed, because the whole thesis of that is that like democracy is nonsense, and it actually makes a point that monarchy is preferable to democracy, but anarchy is preferable to monarchy, is kind of the idea. So it's kind of a fun argument, because a lot of people just blows their minds where you're like, you're saying a king is better? And like, yeah, let me tell you X, Y, Z, why king is better than democracy. And I know a lot of people go, well, oh, constitutional republic. I'm like, okay, how's that constitutional republican working? Is it turning into a democracy right now? I mean, constitutional republic, like, if we're going to be honest, it's just democracy with more steps. Like, let's be real.
Listen, well, it depends, because it's a man perverted it, right? So it was the people. So this is one thing, you know, we can get into this a little, because this is the people, we got fat and happy, so we didn't protect what it should be, because in theory it worked just fine. And a lot of it went down when I think it was the 16th Amendment. You know, senators stopped having to report.
The 19th, personally.
19th. Yeah. Good thing we're not monetized or anything important. But no, when senators had to stop reporting back.
Oh, wait, he has a point. I want to hear more about that one.
No, I unironically think we should repeal it, although I don't think it'll ever happen, because and this is kind of ties into the whole democracy point. I don't think anyone has a right to vote. That's that's a positive right. Yeah. And so if you're telling me that I could somehow magically with the push of a button take out the largest voting base that also tends to vote the worst, I'll do it I'll do it in a minute. I'll do it without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, there was something to having rules for voting, right? And there, you know, if you're not getting, you know, if you're not profitable, if you're not adding something, why the fuck should you have a say in how this country runs? But I digress there. But yeah, either way, I think this was a great conversation. We're gonna have you back on. We're gonna talk more about this and kind of go real into quick, this more.
I gotta make you spur real quick. You said constitutional republic's great in theory, but it got perverted by man. People could say the same exact thing about communism.
Certainly.
And let's be real. Who is going to run these political entities? Men. And then also you got to take into account incentives, or not. When I say men, I mean, you know, people in general. Yeah. But like, obviously I know I just took a shot at women. Yeah, I mean, the idea is like, what else was it going to be? This is always what it'll devolve into, no matter what.
But there will always be a void filled. And what is it filled by, right? Because monarchy might be preferable because things can get done. But it all falls on if you get a benevolent or malevolent ruler, right? And we've seen that. And that's what America escaped from. Hence the Constitutional Republic, the Federalist Papers, Anti-Federalists. They really hashed this out. And then even with anarchy is impossible. It can happen, but it won't last for long. There will be a hierarchy. There will be a void filled. Man cannot lead themselves. They're not capable of it. Man are a following beast, right? You know, so it's like, it is very difficult. And that's why political philosophy is very difficult, right? Because what's the right one? The right one is different depending on the era. So it's like, this can be argued till we're blue in the face, and there's great points for all of them. But, you know, I love it. We could jump on, but I want to hear about the OKC bombing. I do. Because I think this could be super interesting. So tell us, a lot of people, you know, definitely in, you know, my generation, Dave's generation, probably know a little bit about the OKC bombing, but kind of give us a quick synopsis of what the OKC bombing was, and then what you kind of dug into it with Terrence Yaki, if I say his name right.
All right, you just threw a lot at me there. What the Oklahoma City bombing is, because, I mean, you asked what it is. It was On April 19th, 1995, a truck pulled up to the Murrah building, the Murrah Federal building in Oklahoma City, and, you know, 2 people got out, which is a key point. But officially, 1 person got out, the lone wolf, Timothy McVeigh. Although then a lot of people push back and say, "Oh, lone wolf." There's Terry Nichols. All right, Terry Nichols took on a supportive role. Wasn't even there during the bombing. He more just helped with accumulating, you know, bombing components, stuff like that. In a sense, it was a lone wolf, but with a little bit of support in the official narrative. But yes, anyways, the bomb went off, blew up the building. I want to say it was like 168 or 169 people died. You know, most notably, people always bring up that there was a daycare in the building, so it took out daycare. You know, there was theoretically the target was the ATF because there was an ATF office there. There was also a Social Security office in there. Believe there was like a military. I want to say maybe it was Marines. Maybe there were other branches as well, but there was recruiting offices there as well. So anyways, yeah, he blew that up. That's what happened. You know, that's the official narrative, although like that is actually what happened aside from the one little particular component about the official narrative being the one guy, like that John Doe 2 is a big part of the Oklahoma City bombing. You know, over 20 people saw before and after the bombing on the day of like over 20 people saw Timothy McVeigh with another person, and there's actually a John Doe 2 sketch out there that was put together, you know, composite sketch, you know, from all the eyewitnesses of John Doe 2. Ironically, all the case the state used to uphold against McVeigh, the witnesses they used to, you know, determine that it was McVeigh that was at the bombing, you know, because that's how you figure that out, you know, through eyewitnesses. Like, I saw this guy, and enough people come together, and you're like, all right, well, it's pretty dang solid. Pretty much every single one of them also said they saw another person with him, but the official narrative became, oh, you just imagined that guy, oh no, he wasn't there, what are you talking about, there was no John Doe 2. That became the official narrative. That was imagined by them.
Did McVeigh say he was alone, or McVeigh say he was with somebody?
McVeigh is not the most reliable. He's actually given multiple counts, although I think, if I remember correctly, I don't think he ever really admitted officially to a John Doe 2, although maybe there were some instances. That's the big thing with McVeigh. What the hell is even going on with McVeigh? He gave multiple backstories to multiple different people.
I mean, he's really sane.
I mean, I don't know. So far as I wouldn't necessarily personally put a descriptor on whether he was sane or insane. There's definitely a lot of weird stuff with the psyche there. Okay. You know, about conflicting accounts, but I mean, you can read into that one way or the other. I don't really know particularly about his sanity. There's a lot of weird stuff when you go into the things McVeigh said. He did kind of officially, you know, so far as like operating through official channels, he did kind of just give the official narrative pretty much always, which a lot of people was like, that's kind of fishy. Why did he always go with the official narrative? But then there were things like where people would say he was saying other stuff to like his lawyers or to other people in prison, his family. That gets into weird territory. He not to go down too deep of a rabbit hole, but
we like rabbit holes.
He, to his first lawyers and also to his mother and to his sister in letters, and also, you know, to his lawyers, obviously talking to them personally, he claimed that he was a special that. All right, I'll give you what actually, like, well, not, I guess I say actually, I guess it is kind of like, we don't know if he's telling the truth or not here, but what the official story is backed up. He was in the military in Desert Storm. He once he got out of there, he went to go to special forces training and failed. That was the stories. They failed. It was due to having, and this is a story he's given as well, to different people. There was issues with his feet, which, I mean, I was actually active duty military for 11 years, and I did go through, like, I guess something you could almost call special forces training. I failed out as well. And, you know, we were rocking with like 70 pounds on our back for 10 plus miles in the wilderness and stuff. And I can tell you for a fact, if there was issues with your feet, that actually would be a problem. I mean, I want to say it was actually Forrest Gump, where they say one of the best things is fresh socks. And that's actually true. That is very true. If you're a military member, especially if you're rocking around, moving a bunch, going through wild territory, having fresh socks, taking care of your feet is super important. So that makes sense, because he supposedly came from basically almost, very quickly from Desert Storm to the training. So he had kind of been in the shit and kind of supposedly was in rough shape feet wise. Kind of jacked them all up during that time. Kind of wasn't given the best boots, caused a lot of issues. Which that completely tracks, because a lot of people try to be like, what, the boots, his feet, and like, okay, well, that's actually a legit excuse if you understand the kind of training.
Anyone that's ever like hiked or done anything like high level, like I'm a runner, and our shoes are everything. If you're not using the right type of footwear, if you're not taking care of your feet, you can't do those types of things. And like you said, a lot of the training with our military in general is a lot of movement, a lot of walking, a lot of weight carrying, a lot of running. And I get it. If you're not wearing the right stuff, and a lot of things can go wrong, shin splints will cause your muscles to tear off your shins, and a stress fracture, plantar fasciitis, like all these things that, keep the best athletes in the world out of sporting events for a long time can certainly end your training and cause you to sit out. And if you have to sit out, then you're not there anymore, so I get it. That's a legitimate excuse. That's not a, oh, he's making shit up. Like if you're an athlete and never suffered through something like that, like you understand, or a military member, like you get it. That is legitimate.
Yeah, but what I was getting at with him is he also said to his first lawyer and to his I almost said wife, but his mother and sister, and I believe also other individuals claimed that the people that he was in prison with made similar claims that he said to them, that what happened was he... instead of that actually happening, instead of him filling out, what they did is they pulled him aside and they said, hey, due to whatever reasons, you seem to be, someone who has an aptitude for what we're looking for. We want you to essentially be kind of like a covert ops type thing. We want you to do things along the lines of help with drug smuggling operations for like off the book stuff, which anyone who goes into these deep parapolitics type stuff knows that is a thing that happened. Look at like Gary Webb, stuff like that. The Fed boys, that is a thing. They will do drug smuggling to create funds for off the book funds, essentially.
And just look at it's not surprising the Feds would do this. Look at what happened with Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan with the FBI doing that. All the things we're finding out about J6, with how many actual federal agents were involved. So it's not, and anyone that doesn't think that these types of things go on is extremely naive. Our military is always looking to get the leg up somehow, and they're not on the up and up with everything. And again, so it's not surprising. And again, a feasible thing. It is feasible and believable that could be a thing.
Yes, and especially once you start going deep into the OKC bomb, there's other things that make it seem. I don't want to overstate the claim and say that there's any solid proof. But when you start seeing some of the other actors involved and other things going on, it makes it seem like, okay, it's a possibility. But another thing he said is not just the drug smuggling. Also, he was saying that one thing they wanted him to do was, go back home, essentially make this claim that he, failed out. That was the official story, and to start inserting himself into like militia movements, stuff like that. Kind of become create a name for himself there, embroil himself. And I do want to let out for your audience know, you mentioned Gretchen Whitmer. I've done a whole series on a whole playlist. I have a whole playlist on that. I've actually had on one of the, quote unquote conspirators. That is a whole boondoggle. It's nonsense.
Very nice.
Yeah. But that was a story he claimed is that to certain people, but it did real quick. Show it real quick is he, started singing the official narrative to official people, essentially. So, we could go keep tugging on that thread if you want to, but that is a possibility. I would suggest people go check out my series, because we do definitely dive deep into all the different possibilities there. Other things that make it seem like maybe that's reasonable.
Is it possible that the Feds kind of strung him along in the way that they wanted to, and then kind of came to him and was like, you're too deep now, like you're fucked either way, you got to do what we want, sing this tune or you're done? Is it possible that he didn't, not that he didn't want to do this, because maybe he did, maybe he wanted to do something, but is it possible that we saw the attempt to Gretchen Whitmer, and I'll go back to that, the Feds kind of pulling the strings there, and once he was too deep, it's kind of well, you're screwed, dude, you're going to jail either way, so you might as well do what we want you to do type of deal?
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I think even if you don't take the perspective that he was a full-on, the term people use as sheep-dipped is like, this is actually like a kind of a conspiracy term for individuals that were like military and then they get on the books taken out of the military, but in reality they're still doing stuff, covert stuff for the government. That's called sheep-dipped is what they call it. But now
People love the movie Departed. You could believe that goes on. That's exactly what happened essentially in Departed with Leo DiCaprio's character. I get it. That's fiction, but man, fiction usually comes from reality. So that's kind of exactly, if you've ever seen Departed, that's kind of exactly what Jose's talking about there.
Yeah, and so with you were talking about pulling the strings or other Fed entities being there. I think even if you don't take the perspective that he was sheep dipped and he was just say some legit, white supremacist figure because he was hanging out with white supremacists and stuff, I do think that at the very least, maybe you could say they weren't pulling the strings, but they had infiltrated the groups that he was in. There were ATF informants. There's FBI connections, there's CIA connections. It goes deep. There's actually SPLC, so then probably law center connections. While those are less sinister, I genuinely think they actually were just kind of infiltrating white supremacist movements because of SPLC, and that's kind of, they so happened to be there.
The most up and up group in the country, the SPLC. They're just stand up individuals there.
Yeah, I'm definitely not like taking their back, but so far as like, if I say they're informants, a lot of people might start crafting narratives like, "Ooh, what do the SPLCs do?" I don't know. Maybe they did some, but I'm not seeing anything strong there. I just think they just so happened, and it would make sense that the SPLC at that time would be.
There's no reason to make accusations unless you have something to go by, obviously, not to just make fun of them.
Yes, but there's a lot of weird stuff there. There definitely was, the feds had infiltrated it for sure, particularly ATF most notably. Although there were other, FBI people that seemed to be in the mix. There was an operation going on at the time called PACCON, Patriot Conspiracy. It was kind of like the inverse of COINTELPRO, essentially, because, COINTELPRO more targeted like the left. Yep. PACCON was going on at the time, was targeting the right. There was a PACCON operative named John Matthews who claimed he saw Timothy McVeigh in the ballpark of around 20 times at Elohim City. No, crap. I actually stated that wrong. No, it was the SPLC informants that said they saw, McVeigh there around 20 times. Glad I corrected that because I was wrong. But the PACCON operative, he saw Timothy McVeigh with Strassmeyer, with another individual who, in this case, it's very like, whoa, what's going on here? He saw him with Strassmeyer at Elohim City. Strassmeyer is an individual who, I mentioned that ATF informant earlier. There's an ATF informant named Carol Howe, which she had infiltrated the movement. She was, for a period of time, she was dating Strassmeyer while she was informant. She actually claimed that she cased the Murrah building 3 times with Dennis Mahon and Strassmeyer. So, and then that John Matthews figure I was talking about earlier, he also claimed he saw Strassmeyer and McVeigh together at Elohim City. He actually told the FBI this. I believe there's actually an email out there that confirms this. I don't know if that was his testimony, if there's actually a physical one out there, I forget. But he placed them together. He also talked to the FBI kind of like, hey, I saw these guys together. This was after the bombing. And they were like, oh, we were aware. So,
he was a person of interest. We knew who they were. We were just tracking them. So you're getting into a bunch of cool stuff. I do want to get into one thing. You had a shirt on during your appearance in Timcast. Terrence Yecke did not kill himself. Tell us who's Terrence Yecke, what happened, and why we should be outraged and trying to figure out more about this.
Yeah, Terrence Yecke was
sorry.
He was a police officer. He's a black dude, had 2 kids, 2 young kids. He had an ex-wife at the time that they were kind of seemed to be getting things back together. But he was one of the first responders to the Oklahoma City bombing. I've heard some people claim he was the first, but I think the first, one of the first. He was one of the first people in the building. Yeah. He saved 3 or more individuals in the bomb. He ended up getting injured. He fell through 2 floors, hurt his back.
Wow.
one of the key points is when he got out of the hospital. This is according to Tanya Yiki, his ex-wife at the time. Although, like I said, they seemed to be kind of repairing things. She was there. She actually has a whole radio interview out there you can go check out where she talked about all this stuff after the fact. But she said one of the first things he said because she got him picked him up from the hospital. He left as soon as possible. I don't think he was there even like a day. But she got him from the hospital. He was very insistent about getting him. The first thing he said to him, apparently he was crying. He was saying, Tanya, this is not what they're telling you. She was, and she tried to get him to clarify. He really wouldn't. That's like kind of an ongoing theme with him. He very rarely kind of gave much details. There are some sources out there that, kind of goes into a little bit more. There's an individual named Ramona McDonald that there was a letter that came out that got released, that was a letter from him to her where he does lay out a little bit more. He doesn't spell it out explicitly, but he basically does kind of imply kind of what I was saying earlier in the idea of that they at least, if you read the letter, the way he words is along the lines of like that they at the very least kind of screwed up, that they, whether, because a lot of people theorize that maybe this is some sort of sting op gone wrong, because that's totally a thing the feds do where they will take people, they will give them the means, the motive, the opportunity, or not the motive, they usually already have the motive, but the means and the opportunity, and they will completely give them everything and set it up, and then usually bust them last minute. But sometimes things go wrong, and so some people theorize that could be the case.
Do you think Terrence knew his life was in danger, and that's why he was being very cryptic in the things that he said and not saying a lot, and the fact that he knew he saw something he shouldn't? And you said, was there indications that was kind of why he was playing it as he was?
Yes, that's 100% what I think. That's what most people the sources, like, it's particularly Tanya, that's one thing she said is that, like, he never really said too much, kind of would make comments like, I don't want to pull you into this. But yeah.
Do you think Tanya knows more than she's leading on because she saw what happened to Terrence?
No, I don't think she saw anything. What do you mean when you say saw? Like so far,
like in the fact that his death and that, like obviously, like you're claiming that it wasn't a suicide. That's what they claimed. And so, do you think that she knows more and is kind of pleading the "he never told me much" type of card to avoid herself?
I think she did. So far as that, I think if she knew why, she would have said. Okay. Personally, if you listen to radio interview, that's the impression I get. I think he just genuinely didn't tell her. I think he was of the opinion that, like, I don't want to get people I love involved in this because they could get hurt. I mean, there were other people I was talking to, like that Ramona individual he was kind of working with. So, I mean, other people who were already kind of on that track, he was kind of seeming to link up with a little bit. Okay. I think Ramona McDonald, she has been in the source in a article that came out in I think 97 by David Hoffman. She also recently in a CNN article that just came out where they covered this story. She was a source in that. You can tell by the things she says. I think she does probably know more, hasn't necessarily spelled it out. I'm not entirely sure Ramona McDonald's her actual real name. She, in the CNN article, they do say how she changed her name, and in the original David Hoffman article, there's not even a last name listed. It's just Ramona. So I do think she has her reasons for being anonymous. So I will say, for people out there that, like, okay, a lot of people can take that with a grain of salt and be like, well, I don't know, maybe the feds are messing with you or something. Like, there's a million reasons you could think maybe she's full of it. So I'm not saying at all she's like the end all be all for this, but there's definitely some interesting stuff that may lead to possible, what he saw or what he was doing.
Ramona, go on No Way Jose.
Yeah, right. I would love
Jose, come on, do it.
I actually recently interviewed Stephen Vassar, who was one of Terrence Yeaky's best friends. Wow. He also was a John Doe 2 eyewitness, and what else? He was also one of the fellow first responders as well. So I actually just recently had him on. We kind of talk about a lot of that. So I would love to. I mean, if anyone out there knows anyone who has any meaningful information or was there, or whatever, or knows other people, I'd love to. I don't really even know how I could track down this Ramona character. I'd love to talk to them. I have a feeling they probably wouldn't really be open to talking in that format anyways. But I mean, hell, if there's anyone out there that even if they want to talk to me off the record, that's fine. Because I would just, for my own purposes, I mean, maybe there's certain information you'd be like, okay, you can use this on the record, whatever. I mean, any little thing I think can help. I mean, obviously, ideally, it'd be awesome if they just full on, dox themselves, put out all their information, because then we can be like, look, this is this person. You can confirm their identity. Like Stephen Vassar, I had him literally show me his retirement card from the OKCPD.
That's incredible.
Yeah, just to verify who he is, he says he was, stuff like that. Because I would like to, kind of get into more research. It's kind of hard to find these people, but I mean, I've talked to other people who are kind of involved that, don't want to go on the record kind of deal. So, I mean, hell, even just a little stuff like that, I find to be helpful. So,
I mean, it's scary. So yeah, continue with Terrence and his story. So he's, gets out of the hospital. He's telling Tanya this isn't what it is. What else happens to him?
Yeah, he one of the big things is he wrote something in the it's like roughly a 9-page report is one thing that it's claimed by multiple people that he kind of had a back and forth fight with his superiors where they didn't want him to put it through. He actually, Ramona claimed to have a copy of that report at one point, and then ended up after the death it ended up being lost with a bunch of our other documents as well shortly after, which it actually also Tanya or Terrence's apartment actually, like the family checked out later, looked like it had been raided through Tanya's house or apartment. I forget if it was an apartment or a house, but her place got raided through too, lost some stuff. So there's weird stuff going on there. I mean, obviously these are claims they made. I mean, so I'm just passing those on. Take those, how you want to take them. But anyways, there was a back and forth with this. There was also he was also made claims in the letter that there were people, that were being awarded as heroes that he knew weren't there. And also on the flip side, there were people who were there who weren't being awarded. For me, in a conspiratorial mindset, I see that as like, oh, they're trying to set up their own personal heroes. Yep. That way they can control the narrative. Mm-hmm. But, until
they could shut the people up that were actually there and saw something, because why would you say anything? You're not somebody that we recognize. You weren't even there. Like the plausible deniability there of the official narrative versus what the crazy conspiracy theorists are now saying, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, and then with Vassar, he had the same thing. He didn't end up getting any sort of award for being there. So, and he also made a police report that he said later, like years later, he went to go back and look for it and he couldn't find it. It magically disappeared. And in his report, he claimed that that was where he claimed he saw John Doe 2, because he saw the Ryder truck go by. Because I think he said he was responding to a stabbing, and he was nearby the murder building. And that's how he got there so quick. And I guess as that, like before the bombing, he saw a Ryder truck come by and he looked at it and he visually saw two people in the thing. He wasn't able, he admits he wasn't able to, like, cause it was kind of just a car driving by. He wasn't able to like provide a detailed description or anything, but he knows, he said, like, I think his quote is like, he said, as God as my witness. I'm like probably butchering it a little bit. Like there was a second person in that vehicle.
And I do have to say one thing about that too, because people might be like, well, maybe he missaw. When you're a police officer, and especially when you're in a heightened situation, he's responding to a violent situation of a stabbing, your senses are now heightened. So then when you see these types of things and now like your memory kicks in, he's in high, detail mode as it is, because when you're responding to these things, you're trying to fill in as many details while you're doing your job, right? Because then you do have to write a report. That is a big component of it. So for him to sit there and have a memory of it, it is feasible that being in his heightened mode that he was, he definitely saw this. Like that is something that is a claim that, again, it is a claim, man, and flawed. They could see things they didn't see, but there is a high probability that, especially, it's not like he was just walking up the street and he claims, oh, there's a Ryder truck. No, he was already in work mode. He was already in a heightened sense of sensitivity there.
Yeah, and and like I was getting with his report disappearing. I mean, that's another individual. I gave you that over 20 people figure earlier. Saw John Doe 2 with McVeigh the day of the bombing, and now here's another one that he never got. That once again, the report disappeared, and he never got contacted by anyone. He never got any sort of interview from the FBI or anything. They said the first time he really talked to anyone was when he was also one of the sources for the CNN article when he got contacted by CNN. That was the first time he really got contacted. So we hear that over 20 figure, and now it makes you wonder, okay, but what's the real figure? How many other people did they find a way? Because really, that should have been one more person that they added to. He should have been interviewed by the FBI. He should have, that should have been something that got passed on, but somehow that report disappeared. It also speaks to the report with Yiki. Obviously, we don't know specifically what's in the report. I'd love to interview Ramona or someone who actually saw the report. Mm-hmm. It'd be great to be like, hey, what did he actually put in there? Because that is the question. What did he particularly know? I mean, we can kind of think maybe we can kind of get a guess. There, you obviously can make some guesses. Maybe he, somehow saw. I guess he probably wouldn't have saw John Doe too, but maybe he somehow saw the surveillance footage, because the surveillance footage went missing as well, and maybe he somehow saw them. It was also being held at the OCPD, evidence locker room for a period of time. So maybe somehow he got a hold of it. I don't know. There are people who theorized that. I mean, he could have. According to his sister, I believe it was LaShawn Hargrove. Maybe it was one of his other sisters, but I believe it was LaShawn. She claimed that Yiki made some comments about seeing stuff where it looked like the building had blown out as opposed to in, because there were claims that people think there may have been charges in the building, or alternatively, that maybe, because this is like, I don't know if this is technically the official narrative, but this is basically well known at this point that the ATF was holding munitions in that building improperly. So now, if you have munitions like tow missiles or whatever in a building, and say a bomb goes off, it's not that crazy that a bomb would set off another bomb. So then you end up
feasible.
with secondary explosions.
Yep.
So I mean, even that puts pie in the face of the feds, because now they're improperly storing explosive materials, and that cause further damage, essentially being responsible for however many lives that additional damage caused. So that could be a component. So it doesn't have to go to the full what people might consider kook stuff, although there were 2 eyewitnesses that said they saw people shortly before the bombing. I can't remember if it was like a day, I want to say it was like days before or something, what looked like people looking like construction type attire, attaching what looked like kind of explosive charges to columns. So I mean, I don't know. There's 2 people, to do with that we will. I'm not saying I necessarily am asserting that's the case. So I'm saying there's a range from one to the other. Yeah. So I mean, at the very least, it is there. The rescue efforts actually were called off. I want to say 3, but it might have been 2 times, because of bomb scares at the time, which later people attribute that to them trying to pull out those ATF munitions. But now we could speculate maybe some of them went off, and maybe that's something that Terrence may have seen. That's a possibility. So then you got John Doe 2 possibility, you got explosions possibility. In that letter, he did claim he saw an individual named Lucas Franey, which I've been meaning to kind of like dig into, try to see, look into more into that name, see if I can find out more. I haven't really kind of tugged on that thread too much, but he said something along the lines of that he saw him calling in to kind of debrief what happened, and so maybe he overheard some of that conversation. I don't know.
Until we see that report, it's hard to know exactly what Terrence means.
Yeah, and the way it's written in the letter, I mean, obviously he's saying it to a friend he's probably already talked to about this stuff somewhat. Yeah. So it's like, if you were saying something to a friend that they already have the context for, I mean, it sounds like that's what he's saying, is that he was kind of making sort of debrief, and from that he extrapolated that they somehow, to some extent, were responsible. Now, whether they perpetrated it or whether they were just infiltrated the movement and they just failed to stop it, either way, that's bad.
Certainly, that's not good either way.
Yeah, so those are things you could see, but we can fast forward to it was about a year and a month after the bombing. He ends up dead. They find his car in an abandoned area, well, not abandoned, but kind of like off the beaten path type area. I think it was leave down like kind of dirt road. They found his car. It was covered in blood. The state the car was in, there was it looked like some of the side panels had kind of been pulled apart. The car had been pulled apart to hell. It looked like there was, I've seen someone claim that there were what looked like small burn marks kind of on the floor mats, which some people would speculate maybe they were burning documents of some sort, because it is known that like Terrence seemed to be collecting things. Okay. Kind of collecting documents, kind of doing his own research. Mm-hmm. So, if you found that stuff and you're trying to dispose of it, I think maybe they were just kind of getting 2 birds stoned, that's a possibility. Now, then they find that vehicle, and obviously from there, it was actually Mike Ramsey, who was a Canadian County Deputy Sheriff. He's the one who found the vehicle. And from there, then obviously now it's like, oh, we found this car covered in blood. Now we got to go look. And then they ended up finding the body, which the lowest estimates I've heard is half a mile. The highest was 1.5 miles. I lean more towards 1.5 miles, but I mean, I've seen claims half mile. The half mile figure I seen was kind of like claims that were made by the people who have incentives to make it a lesser amount. But either way, it kind of really makes little difference. This guy, they find the body And you'll see why in a second. It makes a little difference. They found the body. He has his wrist slit, his throat cut. There were what looked like rope burns on him. Also, what looked like bruises from like handcuffs on his wrists. Kind of in a very rough. There were grass and dirt in the wounds, and then finally there was a bullet wound to the head, which it was at a weird. It was kind of like
execution style.
Yeah, execution style. It was at it was at an odd angle for someone to shoot themselves. It was kind of like slightly backwards, coming. The bullet would have took a downwards trajectory. I'm trying to describe this because I know this is audio, so it's kind of easier to show. But like, it kind of downward angle. So like,
if you go up and back from like the tip of your ear, kind of like in like that point in the back of your head type of deal to the bottom of your jaw, corner of your jaw type of deal. That's
so which is a
Jose's describing.
Very odd angle for someone to shoot themselves.
And especially if you're shooting yourself and you're nervous as shit because you're about to commit suicide, you're not going to do like a bizarre contortionist angle with the firearm that, that's not. It's not conducive to what he would be trying to accomplish there.
Yeah, it's like it's physically possible, but it's just a very odd. If you're gonna, I can't understand why someone would kill themselves that way. And then additionally, there was no it's a term. I'm no ballistics expert, but like the term I've heard, they call it STELLAT, STELLAT. Maybe some gun nerds know it there, or people who are into that stuff might know what that means. But essentially, what that entails is whenever you shoot yourself at point blank range, it will leave a very noticeable mark. It's very different than if you're further away.
Like also, a burn, right? Like kind of like a burn in the area type of deal.
Something along those lines, but essentially it's a way to be able to tell if someone shot themselves point blank. So not only would he not be shooting themselves point blank, he would have to be going from a distance. Now, how far that distance is, I don't know. I'm not saying that he got sniped or something, or even that it was like too super far away. But the point being is that at the very least he would have had to hold the gun back. So now you're shooting from the back of your head at a downward angle, and you're also, you're also having to aim from the back. You know what I mean? Like,
why are these federal agents not smart when they do this stuff? Like, why are they just not smart when they do this stuff? Like, at least make it look good. And I was just saying, I need to go back and rewatch my Dexter, because Dexter will probably talk about what a STELLAT is at some point, because that was a great show with him. Anyway, sorry, I digress.
But no, anyways, that's how they found the body. And another little interesting note to keep in mind is this guy was sickle cell anemic. So, so obviously if you're to buy the official narrative, or, to buy the idea that he killed himself, then you're essentially, what you're saying is that he did extensive damage to himself in his vehicle, and then after somehow creating all this blood, because there was I believe that there was 2 pints of blood. They said he lost 2 pints of blood. So, and 2 pints isn't enough to kill you, but it's enough to, it's close. Like, I believe I read that the lowest amount, you can die from, I believe, 2.5 pints. You won't necessarily die, because there's like a range.
That's a lot of blood to lose. And I want to make a comment here, because to claim it's a suicide and to say he had, just let alone his wrist slit, and multiple times apparently, right? The slits weren't just like one.
Yes. To be fair, in the police report, they said it was superficial, although there have been claims from different people. I believe one of the medical examiners said otherwise, and there have been other people who have claimed otherwise, that it was not superficial.
But superficial or not, to slit your wrist, like your forearm wrist area, and then to have enough power to slit your own throat to kill yourself, I want everyone just go try and do a really hard forearm workout. And then try to grip something hard and do something like kind of needing some muscle to do, because people get scared about like slitting your throat. Like, you have to go through some shit in order to like really kill yourself that way. There's some bone there. There's some things there that you have to do. So in order to have enough muscle and enough strength to be able to do that while losing blood with your wrist slit that you're already in extreme pain over, that right there, besides all the, the cuff marks, the rope marks, the dirt, the shooting, that right there is very not feasible to be able to do all those things. Like, that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, and so again, if you're to buy that he killed himself, that means he did all that damage to himself, and as a sickle cell anemic, which means he would I mean, I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure that what anemia is like, you bleed more, and then I don't really know enough about sickle cell, but either way, like losing blood is a substantial thing for someone that's sickle cell anemia. He was also a big dude, and like so. The idea would be that he would have traveled at a minimum half a mile to go, and it was like through like rough terrain. There was like barbed wire fence between where he was at, the car was at, and where he'd be going. It's kind of like in just rough terrain, kind of like semi-wilderness, if you will, and kind of ends up getting himself in a ditch and then shooting himself in the back of the head. So.
And even pulling the trigger at that point with the gun, with all that injuries, like your throat's already slit, your wrists are done. Obviously, that gunshot's going to be the thing that does him in, because you can't do everything else. But he's now not being able to breathe because his throat's slit. His arms are in pain. Obviously, he fucked with his wrists, apparently with handcuffs. He put handcuffs on himself. And it's like, no. Just no, he didn't. Like, he did not commit suicide. If all of that is there, it is not a possibility that happened.
I would say even with just because the medical report, I believe, did not include. These are things found from additional sources later, which there were, because it did kind of get like one thing I left out. He never got an actual autopsy. There were medical examiners that did medical examiner reports. So there was those. So we got the medical examiner. There was one medical examiner report. There was another one that people claimed there was, although it apparently it got taken away real quick, kind of got hidden. So I mean, it's like that's kind of in the realm of like, I guess you could almost say myth. I mean, I don't know whether it actually existed or not. I don't know. Either way, the actual medical report, it left out like the rope burns and stuff. It claimed those cuts were superficial. But even if you take that claim, just even the medical examiner claim that it was like superficial cuts to the wrist and throat, but yet somehow end up with all his blood in the car and then ended up in the other place. It still defies credulity. And then I will say the place where he died was in the jurisdiction of the Canadian County Police, like I mentioned earlier. So they were the first ones to show up, kind of see handle the crime scene. They immediately called for a murder investigator or a homicide investigator, and to come to the scene or whatever. But they searched for a while for a gun. They couldn't find one. So think about that. If you're someone who commits suicide. Let's be real. The gun's probably not going to go any more than 5 feet away from the body. Maybe 10 feet if you want to get crazy with it. Because the only thing I can think of is maybe a bullet to the head would create some sort of nervous system reaction that maybe cause some sort of glitch. Or not glitch, but like a kind of involuntary reaction. Maybe you throw the gun.
Nerves. Yeah.
But even then, like, how far is that going to, 10 feet maybe? So it's like you'd find the gun. Let's be real. And then
a wolf came, grabbed it with its mouth, and dragged it away. And that's what happened. It was a wild animal that took it away.
Yeah, and then here's when the weirdness starts to happen a little bit. I mean, although we're already in weird territory. Yeah. It happened in the Canadian County, jurisdiction. The OCPD, the Oklahoma City Police Department, the department that Yiki worked for, decided to take over jurisdiction. They show up, and then magically when they show up, that's when the gun is found. Although there's never any release of what kind of gun, anything like that. So we don't really have any like ballistics or no.
Which is crazy because you would think it would be like, oh, it's his former service firearm. That would be the most likely thing, right? He's very familiar with the service firearm. They obviously don't take them away when they're done being police officers or anything like that, unless they, have an issue and a reason to take it away. But it doesn't seem like he had any reason for it. So the logical thing would be a service firearm, right? Like that's.
This is where Ramona comes back in, because Ramona made the claim in the newest CNN article. Because, like I said, she was in the CNN article that was very recently, like a few months ago, and also in the 1997 article, or was 97 or 96 from Hoffman. And this is newer information that she said that she didn't say earlier. Although, like, some people might, point at that and trying to put at her credibility. But I think it's completely, like, let's be real, it was much closer to the bombing at the time, so she might have been tight-lipped with some facts. Yeah. But she did in the newest CNN article say that according to, she talked to Yiki, I believe she had coffee with him the day prior, and according to him, he was getting ready to go to have a meeting with some, suits types that she had actually claimed came to talk to her too, like shortly, like not long before that, kind of was like, was acting like they were interested in her research or stuff. And according to Yiki, he was saying stuff along the lines of like, we need to get this information out, kind of like, but he was kind of like apprehensive because he is like, I don't know if like these are I can trust these people, like can I give them this information? I don't know, really want to get the information out, like kind of like, I don't know, we got to get that stuff out there. So according to her, he said he was going to go meet with these individuals. According to her, he said that he was, as a precaution, was not going to take a service weapon with him because, I don't think he gave a specific reason, but one can infer that like, obviously if someone's is going to do something to you, they may want to look like a suicide. Yep. And then obviously the move is use your own service weapon against you. Yeah. Because then obviously had he used his own service weapon against himself, then it would be, and you want to support the idea that it was a suicide, you would immediately be like, yeah, here's a gun. We either run all the ballistics, do everything, by the book in that way, and be able to support their case that, look, he killed himself.
And everyone needs to remember, you didn't bring this is in the late 90s, 97, right, is when he was, so it's like
96 is when he died.
96 is when he died. So getting information out there was not as easy as we do now, right? Like the internet was fresh, like Windows 95 just became a thing. Al Gore just invented the internet, and it was a very like different time. So in order to get these type of information out, you would have to go to an outlet, and you would have to go to some people that you could eventually trust and possibly sell this stuff to, so that they could put it out there. It was like, it's not like now where you could just go start a Substack or create a blog or just throw things out there on a Discord like an idiot, and get yourself locked up like that other psyop individual did not too long ago. So it's an interesting thing, and it's tough because people in this generation need to realize, in this mindset need to realize, he was working up against a lot more difficult stuff in order to get this type of information out there.
Yes, no, for sure. And I would say I'm of the opinion that, I get why he went about it the way he did, but I think he probably would have been better served to be loud and proud. Because I think
go to the press, like officially go to a big press and make it public, make it known, like, this is who I am. I just met with CNN or whatever. Yep. I just met with the New York Times. Like, don't let it be a secret what you're doing, so that it is now much more. They still could kill you, but it now would open up a lot more of a can of worms, which is the way he did it. It's a lot easier to cover it up because he was so secretive about it.
Yes, exactly. I think he probably would have been better served to probably tell everyone, but I understand where he's coming from and the logic of why he went about it the way he did. It also may have been one of those things where you're like, okay, well, I want to wait until I have solid stuff. So he may have been accumulating stuff. Yeah, he was like this Ramona individual we talked about is someone who was kind of had a kind of like almost like a survivors group type thing that kind of slowly evolved into kind of like, also kind of like a clearinghouse for like kind of pulling together documents and different research stuff. So they were definitely kind of working together on that kind of stuff because she was collecting documents as well. So, that he was working with people, but they were almost like kind of a semi-secretive group. They weren't really blasting this out there to everyone. But I guess, depending on what kind of information you have, I guess I can kind of understand like, hey, well, maybe we should sit on this until it's more bulletproof, either way, he ended up dead. So
I'm curious, who is the CNN author, if you do remember, and what is their opinion of this? Did they kind of give, it's CNN, so they probably can't help themselves, but did they give their opinion on what they think actually happened, or was this more of a straight news article? These are the interviews, this is the facts, take what you want from this?
Thomas Lake is his name. Reading that article, it was written like in the way a journalist would write it. And I don't mean that in like to say in like a bad journal, just like he just laying out the facts, laying out the information. I feel like if you read that, you do get the impression that he definitely thinks he probably didn't kill himself. Obviously he doesn't, I don't think he doesn't really say it that way, but he's just laying out the facts. And I struggle to believe someone could lay out the facts the way he did and think, otherwise. So, good on that one CNN journalist of doing good work, which is, I was as surprised as anyone to see that from CNN.
I will say this, because I used to do, before this show is what it is, I did a show called The Medium, and I also dug through a bunch of articles and would do a daily show where I talked about it. The actual journalists at a lot of these places like that actually want to do the journalism, and specifically on the website side, on the online side, not the analysis, are still doing decent journalism, still doing okay stuff. And they get buried because the analysis is what gets the popular stuff, right? This is what we think happened. But I do want to defend a little bit. There are still a lot of pretty decent journalists. Now, journalists have skewed to the left for the beginning of time, essentially. But there are still a good amount of decent journalists that are doing work like that. And, people might not believe it. They are at CNN. They are at, Fox. They are there, where they do just kind of write articles. And they're the boring articles that nobody really likes. Every once in a while, you'll get this explosive one about a case like this. And that, it's good journalism. But there are, if you do search for them, like, we're not going to get to it, but the Jordan Neely situation that just occurred, Bum Floyd, where he was killed on the train. You can go on CNN and find the article about the news piece. But it will be overshadowed highly by all the analysis of it. So I do want to say that there are still journalists trying to do their jobs. It's just very difficult for them.
Yes. Yeah. So far as Yiki, I think it kind of laid out I guess I could maybe go more into the semi-ethereal, I say ethereal official narrative, because I don't believe there ever was like a full-on official narrative. It did get ruled as suicide almost immediately, but so far as like some of the other different minor aspects, when I say official narrative, I guess like kind of what vaguely became what the one side was kind of saying, they were getting at, they were getting at that they were attributing it slightly to kind of being distraught from the aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing, and also family problems. Because like I mentioned earlier, Tanya was his ex-wife at the time. They had divorced. They had divorced, I believe, shortly before the Oklahoma City bombing. But at the period of time around the time he died, they had been interacting regularly. They were, friendly. In the radio interview, you see that she said something along the lines that like he would introduce her as like his wife. It's definitely heavily implied that seemed they were rekindling things, getting things back together, or like kind of working on working them as a couple kind of deal. He also actually, shortly before he died, he asked her to marry him again. Wow. And the reasoning being is he said something along the lines of, "This is the only way I can make sure that you guys are taken care of in case something happens to me," which is ominous considering what happened. Yep. They didn't end up getting married before that happened, because that was shortly before. So, wow. And what I'm getting at is they during this period of time, there was a VPO active, a victim protective order, I believe is what it is. It's essentially a restraining order for those who aren't aware of what it is. Okay. And shortly before the bombing, it's a little bit conflicting. According to the Oklahoma City Police Department, there were something along the lines of like that he supposedly put his hands on her and made some claims like he was going to kill himself and her. She did say in the radio interview, she didn't claim any physical harm, but she did claim he made some like kind of like threats that like, and it was almost like she was alluding to the maybe just kind of like was snapped under pressure type thing. I don't know the particulars. I don't really want to make one strong claim one or the other, because I don't know particularly what happened. Something happened like the 90s, and when you're dealing with domestic abuse type stuff, it's two parties with two different claims. It's just because the courts upheld a protective order, I don't know, one way or the other. Also, he could have done everything bad they said he did and still done everything else. So and also if we are to take the claim, if we are kind of getting conspiratorial and saying like he was kind of murdered by powers that be, well, what do you think they're going to do? You think like obviously they're going to dig for stuff in their past and latch onto that. Also, on the victim protective order, I know a lot of people will commonly bring up that like, okay, well, it doesn't matter if they are interacting. It still violates the protective order. Like, so they were, maybe legally speaking, they were breaking law. I don't care like about the law side of things, like whatever, but it was very clear she was okay with him being around. She wanted him to be around. They were interacting regularly. They were in a good place. And the day of his death, she was contacted by, I believe it was, I want to say it was Major Upchurch, but one of the individuals in the police department, essentially trying to get her to essentially report him for violating the protective order.
Wow.
And this was the day of. And she said, no, I'm not doing that. And one of the things with Steve Vassar, once again, he also made a claim that he saw a report in the system that the police report, to do with this, that they had contacted her and she went through with it. She claims otherwise. And then at that, essentially that's kind of the point being that he was distraught. He was going to lose his job. In that police report, essentially they were going to strip him of his weapon, kind of his badge, all that. And so the idea being that he'd be distraught, he was losing his weapon, distraught from the Oklahoma bombing, distraught from his family situation, he decided to kill himself. But funny enough, in that CNN article as well, they contacted Upchurch, the individual in that police report that Vassar said was the one who did this, and he claims no recollection of anything like that happening. So weird.
And it's kind of he said, she said at that point, which is always tough. You kind of take it. So I do want to ask you, when you were looking back at this, did you get a look at any of the initial local reporting versus what the national reporting became? Because a lot of these things, when they happen, the local papers will give a little bit of a different story in a few articles. And then once the national story hits, then they kind of all started falling in line, right? Did you look and see if there was any good reporting on what kind of happened, where people got the information early about some of the wounds and some of the weird things that are going on, and then kind of the narrative changed as the national narrative became the thing?
I can't really speak to that too much. Most articles I've seen, aside from the two that I mentioned, and I'm sure there were other ones as well. There was another one written by Wendy Painting, who's written a great book about the Oklahoma City bombing, who's kind of, obviously having a similar perspective to me. But it does seem that most of them were just kind of hero cop dies, it's tragedy, one quote you hear a lot is, I forget who the quote was attributed to, but the Oklahoma City bombing claimed one more life this day, kind of hamming it up like that. So, which makes sense, I guess, in a local sense, that it would just kind of be oh, wow, look at this sad thing, look at this hero. They did kind of play that up. In the big press, they didn't really lean too hard into the some of the family stuff I was getting at, because kind of the impression that we just really want to lean on this hero cop angle, kind of sad, suicide, blah, 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 blah. But so, I haven't really kind of dissected these articles, looking at it from that perspective. Obviously, I was only 4 when the Oklahoma City bombing happened. I would have been 5 when he died.
I was 7. Doing the 7 when the bombing happened. David wasn't a thing yet.
I wasn't born.
He wasn't born. David was born a year later.
Yes. So I can't really speak particularly to what the vibe was there, although it is kind of I feel like my impression is just as my impression. It was kind of undercovered. So and when it was covered, it was kind of in that realm of look at this sad thing. Oh, another look kind of almost look at this effect this kind of has on our boys in blue kind of deal. Sad and stuff.
All right. So Jose, this was lots of fun, brother. I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was lots of fun. So if anyone's interested, we just kind of gave you a taste of the type of research that Jose did. And I hope, Jose knows his shit, whether it's libertarianism, whether it is obviously the OKC bombing. He's a guy that does the research. He'll do the work so that you don't have to. He reads the books to you so you don't have to. So it's definitely something to go check out. No Way Jose, where can they find it? Is that kind of anywhere you can find a podcast?
Most. I need to get around to finally making a Rumble account. I haven't done that
so
yet.
Do we, actually. We're not there.
But I have a YouTube channel. I'd say just for ease of access, obviously it'd be great if you started following me on alternative platforms, even if it's audio. But if you so far is because a lot of my stuff is series or stuff like that. So it's trying to find that in a audio format. They don't really let you group up things like playlists. So it is a nice tool to use YouTube because you can just go to YouTube, go to playlists, and you'll see every one of the series I've done. A lot of them are still ongoing and I haven't completely finished them. And particularly that OKC one, you can go there. That's been pretty popular. But yeah, you can find me YouTube, all the major out podcasts. I'm on Odyssey as well if you do want to find another. Nice. Use another alternative video platform if that's your preference. Pretty much all my stuff is completely, not really visually centered, so you can pretty much get away with just doing audio. But you can follow me on Twitter at TowerGangJose, and I appreciate you having me on.
And you'll see the cool art. I assume Top Lobster made your Jose avatar there for Twitter.
Yeah, he's done a lot of art for me, a lot of different thumbnails, a lot of that. He's the one who did the Terrence Yeeki shirt, art. So he's done a lot of stuff for me. He's one of my close friends. I've been lucky to have him.
Awesome. So once again, this is the Alex Questa Show. Dave, anything you had to say? You were kind of quiet as we were rolling. We were just getting educated on the OKC bombing. It is super interesting.
Absolute shit tonight. I haven't said anything, but I was very happy to hear all of that information. I've heard nothing about the OKC bombing. Like, I've heard McVeigh. That's the only name I've really heard out of it, and that's just like in maybe cultural things that I've heard from before. So really, I learned a shit ton tonight. I will probably dive in, especially because I have off work tomorrow. I'll probably dive into your series a good bit. But it's been a great night, especially like even before that with the politics discussion, which I would love to have you back on and hear all about what you have.
I think we need to do like at least 2 more at a minimum where we just go heavy into like the libertarian politics stuff and then we go heavy into the bombing. I feel like that could be appropriate. So
it was a great night. Love having you on, Jose. I would love to have you on again, and you seem very educated, very willing to do whatever the hell you want to do, whatever hell you need to do to learn about this shit. So I love that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I try to do my best. I've been lucky to, being one of the benefits of kind of being a podcaster is like I kind of do the interview thing, and usually whenever I cover a topic, I'll usually either like with live readings just read the book itself, or with a specific topic, you're in a spot where, especially as your platform grows, you get to a point where you can just find whatever expert on a given thing. Like with the Michigan thing, I was able to get one of the actual quote unquote conspirators of it, and I've also covered Duncan Lemp. I had his at one point. I had his wife. I don't know if you know the Duncan Lemp story. I had his girlfriend that was there when he died.
That's awesome.
With him. So that's another one I had to people check out. Most of the stuff you can find, stuff like that. I've covered a lot of stuff. Duncan Lemp, Michigan, a lot of anarchist content, a lot of live readings. The OKC. Got a little cover a little bit of JFK. I need to go more into that. But yeah, I got definitely a lot of good stuff for you to check out. I highly recommend go checking out the playlist and see what catches your fancy, or just scroll through the catalog.
There's good and bad to come out of this. The good is I'm definitely going to go dive into it. The bad is I have 200 damn episodes to binge now, and 200 plus episodes. So, but again, Jose, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone, if you like what you heard, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. We have fantastic, awesome, interesting guests like Jose every single week. We're going to continue to do it. Go find us on the socials. Just go search the Alex Questa Show. So again, everybody, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. So long, everybody.